The Wyoming Territory had a way of stripping a man down to what he really was. No pretense survived out here. No lies lasted long. The land was too honest for that, too brutal, too indifferent to the stories men told themselves about who they were and what they deserved. Silas Drummond had learned this the hard way. He rode through country that looked like God had started making something and then walked away halfway through. Brown grass stretched to the horizon in every direction, broken only by clusters of rocks that might have been hills in a more generous landscape. The sky above was the color of old bone, heavy with clouds that threatened rain but never delivered. Everything was dry. Everything was dying. Everything was exactly as it should be, he thought, for a man like him. 42 years old. That was what the calendar said anyway. But Silas felt older. He felt ancient. He felt like something that had been left out in the weather too long, something that had forgotten what it was like to be whole. His horse moved beneath him with the steady rhythm of an animal that had stopped caring about destinations a long time ago. They were alike in that way, Silas and this horse. Both of them just moving forward because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering. And remembering was the one thing Silas could not afford to do. But the memories came anyway. They always did. Thomas, 8 years old. Blonde hair that would not stay flat no matter how much his mother combed it. A gap-toothed smile that could make even the worst day feel survivable. Hands that were always reaching for something, always curious, always wanting to touch and understand the world around him. Thomas, who had begged to come along that day. Just this once, Pa. I want to see what you do. I want to be like you. Silas closed his eyes against the memory. But it did no good. It never did any good. The images played behind his eyelids with the same relentless clarity they had possessed for 4 years now. The chase through the canyon, the outlaw turning, firing blindly, Silas ducking, feeling the bullet whisper past his ear. And then the sound, that small surprise sound that Thomas made, like he could not quite believe what had happened, like he was waiting for someone to explain the joke. Silas had caught him before he hit the ground, had held him while the blood spread across his small chest like a flower blooming in reverse, had watched the light fade from those curious eyes while Thomas whispered words that would haunt every moment of Silas's existence from that day forward. I am not scared, Pa. Do not be sad. How could a boy of 8 years say something like that? How could he face death with more courage than his father had ever possessed? How could he forgive with his last breath the man whose pride and carelessness had killed him? Silas did not know. He only knew that he had carried those words with him every day since. A weight that no distance could lighten, no whiskey could drown, no amount of running could outpace. His wife Clara had left 3 months after the funeral. She had not screamed at him or thrown things or cursed his name. That might have been easier to bear. Instead, she had simply looked at him one morning with eyes that held nothing. Not anger, not love, not even hatred, just nothing, and said words that were worse than any accusation. I cannot look at you anymore, Silas. When I look at you, I see the man who killed my son. She was not wrong. That was the worst part. She was not wrong at all. So Silas had done what he did best. He ran. He sold everything, bought a horse and enough supplies to disappear, and rode west until he found a place remote enough that no one would ever find him. A small cabin on the edge of a nothing town called Mercy Ridge, which was a bitter joke of a name for a place that had shown him neither mercy nor anything resembling a ridge. 3 years he had lived there. 3 years of chopping wood and hunting game and drinking himself to sleep and waking up to do it all again. 3 years of trying to outrun a ghost that lived inside his own chest. It was not working, but it was all he had. The wind picked up, carrying dust and the smell of something he could not identify. Silas pulled his hat lower and squinted at the horizon. He had been riding for 2 days now, coming back from a trading post 40 miles south, where he had exchanged furs for flour and coffee and ammunition. The cabin was still a day away, maybe more if the weather turned. He was thinking about nothing in particular, letting his mind go blank the way he had trained it to do, when he saw it. At first he thought it was a fence post, just another piece of wreckage left behind by people who had given up on this land, same as everything else out here. The frontier was littered with such remnants, broken dreams made physical, hopes that had dried up and blown away. But then the fence post moved, just barely, just a small shift of weight, but enough. Silas's hand went to his rifle before his brain caught up with what he was seeing. 20 years of hunting men had built instincts that did not fade, even after 3 years of trying to forget them. His eyes scanned the terrain automatically, looking for threats, looking for the ambush he was already half expecting. Nothing. No movement on the horizon, no riders, no sounds except the wind pushing through dead grass. He dismounted slowly, keeping his rifle ready, boots hitting the ground without sound. 40 yards out, he began to see details that made his stomach clench. Not a fence post. A woman. She was tied to a wooden post that had been driven into the hard ground. Her head hung forward, dark hair falling in matted curtains that hid her face. Her dress, what remained of it, was torn and stained with dirt and something darker. Her wrists were bound behind the post with rope pulled so tight that her hands had gone the purple-black color of dead things. And at her feet, wrapped in a filthy blanket, something small was moving. Silas approached at an angle, never putting his back to the open country, rifle raised and ready. His mind was running through possibilities the way it used to when he was tracking dangerous men. Bandits sometimes used bait. Tie up someone helpless, wait for a fool with a conscience to come running, then put a bullet in him and take everything he had. He had seen it done, had nearly fallen for it once, years ago, before he learned to trust nothing and no one. 20 yards, 10. The woman's breathing was shallow, ragged, barely there. Her face came into view as he got closer, and what he saw made something twist in his chest. She was young, mid-20s maybe, and someone had beaten her badly. One side of her face was swollen and purple, the eye completely closed. Dried blood crusted her temple and her split lip. Bruises covered what he could see of her arms and shoulders, layered in different colors that told him this had not happened all at once. This had been sustained, deliberate, cruel. The baby in the blanket was newborn, maybe a day old, maybe less. Its cries were thin and weak, the sound of something that had already learned the world was not a kind place. Silas crouched down, set his rifle within reach, and touched the woman's shoulder as carefully as he could. "Ma'am," no response. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered. The one eye that could still open cracked slightly, and for a moment she looked at him without seeing. Then something shifted in her expression. Fear, raw and animal and absolute. Her lips moved. Cracked and bleeding, they formed words that came out as barely a whisper. Do not give her. To them. And then she was gone again, slipping back into unconsciousness like a stone sinking into dark water. Silas looked at the baby. She was wrapped tight but not carefully, the way someone might wrap something they did not care about keeping. Her face was scrunched and red, streaked with things he did not want to identify. But she was alive, barely, impossibly, alive. He pulled his knife. The woman flinched even in her unconsciousness. Just a small twitch, but enough to tell him she was not completely gone. He kept his movements slow, visible, and cut through the rope binding her wrists. The moment the tension released, she collapsed forward. Silas caught her before she hit the dirt. She weighed almost nothing. He could feel her bones through her skin, could feel the fever burning through her body like a fire that had been left to rage unchecked. Before he stood, his eyes caught something on the ground. Boot prints in the dust. 3 sets leading away, already half filled by the wind. But there was something else too. A 4th set of tracks, smaller and lighter, leading from behind a cluster of rocks about 30 yards away. Someone had stood there and watched. Someone had seen what happened and then walked away without helping. Silas filed that information away. It might mean something later. He looked around one more time. Still nothing. No riders on the horizon. No sounds except the wind. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to ride into the nearest town and report what he had found. Let someone else handle it. There would be questions, sure, but he had not done anything wrong. He had just been passing through. But the nearest town was 2 days back, and this woman did not have 2 days. This baby did not have 2 hours. Silas stood there for a long moment, the wind pulling at his coat, the weight of a choice settling onto his shoulders like a physical thing. He thought about Thomas, about the way his son had looked at him with trust so complete it had felt like a responsibility Silas could never live up to, about the way that trust had been betrayed in the worst possible way. He thought about Clara's eyes on that last morning, the emptiness in them, the accusation that did not need words. He thought about 3 years of running and hiding and drinking and trying to forget, and how none of it had worked, and how none of it ever would. Then he made his choice. He laid the baby down gently on a clean patch of ground. She squirmed and cried, but he had nothing to give her right now except a promise. He went to his horse, pulled his bedroll free, and spread it out on the ground. He lifted the woman as carefully as he could manage and laid her on it. She was burning up. The infection was already setting in. He could see the red streaks crawling up from the wounds on her wrists, could smell the sickness beginning to take hold. Without help, she would be dead within days, maybe hours, but not if he could help it. He wrapped her in his coat, then picked up the baby and tucked her against the woman's chest, skin to skin. The infant quieted almost immediately, responding to her mother's heartbeat even through the fever. Getting them both onto the horse took longer than it should have. The woman was dead weight. The baby kept squirming. The horse did not like the smell of blood and sickness. But Silas had spent 20 years doing things that did not come easy, and he was not about to stop now. Finally, he got them settled. He would walk. The horse would carry them. It was the only way. He took one last look at the post, at the rope still hanging there like an accusation. Then he turned his back on it and started walking north. His cabin was another day and a half on foot. One room, solid walls, a roof that did not leak more than a little, a creek 20 yards down the slope, a patch of ground he had cleared for a garden that never took. It was not much, but it was his, and it was quiet. And now maybe it would be something more. Silas walked through the dying light of the afternoon, leading his horse and its precious cargo, and for the first time in 4 years, he felt something stirring in his chest. Not hope exactly. He had forgotten what hope felt like, but something close, something that might grow into hope if he gave it room. The journey took longer than he had expected. The woman woke twice, both times confused and terrified, both times whispering the same desperate words. Do not give her to them. Promise me. Do not let them have her. Silas did not know who they were, did not know what had happened to put this woman in such a state of terror. But he made the promise anyway, because it was the only comfort he could offer, and because something in her broken voice told him that this was not the plea of a madwoman. This was the plea of a mother who had seen exactly what waited for her child if the wrong people found them. The baby cried off and on throughout the night. Silas stopped twice to let her nurse, holding the unconscious woman upright and positioning the infant at her breast, the way he had seen Clara do with Thomas so many years ago. It was awkward and desperate, and nothing like proper care. But the baby ate, and that was what mattered. By the time they reached the cabin, the sun had set and risen and set again. Silas had not slept in 2 days. His legs burned. His back ached. His hands were raw from leading the horse over rough terrain, but they were alive, all 3 of them. And that was more than he had expected when he first saw that post in the distance. Inside, he lit the lamp, got the fire going, and laid the woman on his bed. The only bed. She looked worse in the light. Her skin was pale as old paper, stretched tight over bones that seemed too close to the surface. The fever had gotten worse. The red streaks had spread further. Silas knew what came next if he did not act fast. He had seen enough men die of infection during his years as a bounty hunter to know that death did not come quick or easy. It came slow and hot and filled with suffering. He boiled water, tore up his spare shirt for bandages, cleaned her wounds as thoroughly as he knew how, which was not as thoroughly as a doctor would have done, but it was better than nothing. She whimpered sometimes when he touched the worst spots, but she did not wake. The baby lay beside her in a basket he had rigged up from an old crate. She was quiet now, sleeping the deep sleep of the exhausted. In the lamplight, Silas could see her face clearly for the first time. She was beautiful, impossibly, inexplicably beautiful. Dark hair like her mother, tiny fingers that curled around nothing, a mouth that moved in her sleep like she was practicing for words she did not yet know. Silas sat back on his heels and looked at them both. He did not know their names, did not know where they had come from, did not know who had done this to them or why. He did not know if the woman would survive the night, but they were here now, in his cabin, in his care. That made them his responsibility. He stood, banked the fire, and settled into the chair by the door with his rifle across his lap. Sleep did not come easy. Every sound outside made him tense. Wind in the trees, an owl hunting, the creak of settling wood. He kept expecting to hear hoofbeats, kept expecting men to come riding up with torches and guns and questions he could not answer. But the night stayed quiet, and when the sun came up, the woman was still breathing. Silas did not know it yet, but everything was about to change. Her name was Nora. She told him that on the fifth day, when she finally woke up enough to form coherent words. Her voice was rough, broken, like something that had been screaming and then forgotten how to stop. Where? She tried to sit up, gasped at the pain in her body, and fell back against the thin pillow. Her hands went to her stomach, then to her sides, searching frantically for something she could not find. "The baby," Silas said quickly. "She is right here. She is fine." He nodded toward the basket near the fire where the infant lay sleeping, wrapped in the cleanest cloth he had been able to find. Nora's eyes fixed on the basket. She stared at it for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then something broke in her expression, and she began to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just silent tears streaming down her bruised face. The crying of someone who had forgotten what relief felt like and was not quite sure how to process finding it again. "You should have left us," she whispered finally. Her voice was barely audible. "Why did you not just leave us there?" Silas did not answer. There was no answer that would make sense to her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She drifted in and out for the next several days. Sometimes she was lucid, able to take water, eat a little of the broth he made from dried meat and wild onions. Other times she was gone, lost in fever dreams that made her thrash and cry out and call names he did not recognize. Silas kept watch. He kept the wounds clean, kept her warm, kept the baby fed as best he could. He found a goat wandering loose near the creek, probably escaped from some abandoned homestead, and he caught it and milked it for the infant when Nora was too sick to nurse. It was not enough, but it was something. On the 8th day, Nora stayed awake long enough to tell him her full name. On the 9th, she asked for his. "Silas Drummond," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes were sharp now, the fever finally broken, though the bruises still painted her face in shades of purple and yellow that made it hard to read her expression. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you help us?" Silas shrugged. "It did not seem right to leave you there. Most men would have. I am not most men." Her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "No," she said quietly. "I suppose you are not." The first time she tried to stand, she made it 2 steps before her legs gave out. Silas caught her before she hit the floor, eased her back onto the bed. She was shaking, pale, sweat beading on her forehead, despite the cool air in the cabin. "You are not ready," he said. "I cannot just lie here." Her voice was tight with frustration. "I need to. I have to. You have to heal. Everything else can wait. You do not understand." Nora's hands twisted in the blanket, knuckles white. "They will come looking." The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Silas had been waiting for this, for the explanation that would make sense of what he had found. But now that it was coming, he found himself bracing against it like a man preparing to take a punch. "Who?" he asked. She did not answer right away, just sat there staring at her hands, her jaw working like she was trying to find words that would not come. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was flat, emotionless. The voice of someone telling a story they had lived through and were still trying to survive. "My husband was Samuel Aldridge." The name meant nothing to Silas. "His family owns the second largest cattle ranch in the territory," Nora continued. 2,000 head. More land than some states back east. Money and power, and connections that go all the way to the territorial governor. She paused, her eyes distant. Samuel was the eldest son. He was supposed to inherit everything. And then he died. How? The official story is that he fell from his horse, broke his neck, a tragic accident. Silas heard what she was not saying. And the real story? Nora looked at him then. Her eyes were hard, the eyes of someone who had seen something terrible and learned to carry it alone. "The real story," she said, "is that his brother pushed him off a cliff." Silas felt the words land like stones dropped into still water. He did not interrupt. did not ask questions, just waited for her to continue. They were arguing, Nora said. Samuel and his brother Garrett, about money, about the inheritance, about whether Samuel was giving enough to the family and taking too much for himself. She shook her head slightly. They fought about it all the time. But that day was different. That day, Garrett followed Samuel out to the cliffs where he liked to ride. I do not know why. I do not know what he was planning. Maybe he was not planning anything at all. Maybe it just happened. She paused. Her hands were shaking now. But I saw it. I was there. I had followed Samuel because I was worried about him, worried about how angry Garrett had been at dinner the night before. I hid in the rocks when I heard them shouting, and I saw Garrett put his hands on Samuel's chest and push. The silence in the cabin was absolute. Even the baby seemed to be holding her breath. Samuel went over the edge, Nora continued. He did not even scream, just fell. And Garrett stood there at the top, looking down at what he had done, and then he walked away like nothing had happened. Did he see you? No, I do not think so. I hid until he was gone. I was too scared to move, too scared to breathe. And then I went home, and I did not say anything to anyone because I knew what would happen if I did. I knew Garrett would kill me too. But he found out anyway. He suspected. From the beginning he suspected. The way I looked at him. The way I could not meet his eyes. He knew something was wrong, even if he was not sure what. She laughed, a bitter sound that held no humor. And then I got pregnant. Silas was beginning to see where this was going. Samuel had been dead for a month when I realized I was carrying his child, Nora said. I thought it would protect me. I thought Garrett would leave me alone if I was carrying the Aldridge heir. Instead, it made everything worse. Why? Because Garrett decided the baby was not Samuel's. Nora's voice went flat again, that same dead tone she had used to describe her husband's murder. He told everyone I had been unfaithful, that I was a liar and a whore who had gotten pregnant by another man and was trying to claim Aldridge money and land. He said the baby was a bastard and I was a disgrace and that the family would never accept either of us. Was it true? Nora's head snapped up. Her eyes blazed with sudden fury. No. God, no. I never touched anyone but Samuel. I never even looked at another man. But it did not matter. Garrett had money and power, and a story people wanted to believe. I had nothing but my word. The fury drained from her face as quickly as it had come, leaving exhaustion in its wake. I gave birth 3 days before you found me, alone in my house, while Garrett's men watched outside to make sure I did not try to run. She swallowed hard. The baby came fast, faster than I expected. By the time it was over, I could barely stand. Silas thought about the state she had been in when he found her. The blood between her legs, the weakness, the fever. She had given birth days ago and then been dragged out into the wilderness and tied to a post. It was a miracle she had survived it all. They came for us the next night, Nora said. Garrett and 2 of his cousins. They pulled me out of bed and dragged me outside and threw me over a horse like I was a sack of grain. They took the baby too. I thought they were going to kill us both right there. But Garrett had other plans. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He said he wanted me to suffer. He said dying fast was too good for a lying whore like me. So he found that post in the middle of nowhere, and he tied me to it, and he said, you are going to die out here. You are going to die slow, and then the coyotes are going to eat you, and no one is ever going to know what happened. And the baby's going to die with you, and that will be the end of it. Silas felt something cold and sharp settle in his gut. He had known bad men in his time. He had hunted them for 20 years. But this was something else. This was cruelty so complete, so deliberate, that it made his hands ache for a gun. But he left the baby with you, he said. Nora nodded. I think he wanted to watch me watch her die. I think that was part of the punishment. He put her at my feet, wrapped in that filthy blanket, and he said, now you can watch your bastard die, knowing it is all your fault. She closed her eyes. And then they rode away, and I was alone, and I thought that was the end. But you survived. I do not know how. Nora's voice broke. I do not know why. I should have died out there. We both should have. But we did not. Silas remembered the 4th set of tracks he had seen, the smaller, lighter footprints leading away from the rocks. You were not completely alone, he said slowly. Someone else was there. Someone watched what they did to you. Nora's eyes flew open. What? When I found you, I checked the ground. Force of habit. There were 3 sets of boot prints leading away, the men who tied you up, but there was a 4th set too, smaller, lighter. Someone had stood behind those rocks and watched everything, and then that person walked away without helping you. Nora's face went pale. I I remember something. When they were dragging me out of the house, I thought I saw someone. A woman, young with red hair. She was hiding behind a water barrel watching. But then she was gone, and I thought I had imagined it. You did not imagine her. She was real, and she saw everything. But who is she? Why did she not help? I do not know. But whoever she is a witness, and that might matter later. Nora was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Then she said something that surprised Silas. Even if she talks, even if she tells everyone what she saw, it will not matter. Garrett has too much power, too much money. No one in this territory will go against the Aldridge family. Not for a woman like me. A woman like you. A nobody. Nora's voice was bitter. My father died when I was 16, left behind debts I could not pay. I had 2 choices. Marry someone who would settle those debts or end up selling myself in a brothel. Samuel Aldridge was not a kind man, but he was not the worst either. I thought I could manage. She looked at Silas and there was something raw in her expression, something that went beyond fear or anger or despair. I never loved him. I know that is a terrible thing to say about your dead husband, but it is true. I was grateful to him for saving me from the streets, but I did not love him. And I do not think he loved me either. We were just 2 people trapped in the same arrangement, trying to survive. And now he is dead, Silas said. And his brother wants you dead too. Yes, because as long as I am alive, as long as I remember what I saw, Garrett can never be safe. I am the only person in the world who knows that he murdered Samuel, and he will not stop until he silences me forever. Silas was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind pushed against the cabin walls. In her basket, the baby stirred, made a small sound, and settled back into sleep. Then let him come, Silas said. Nora blinked. What? Let him come. Silas met her eyes and his voice was steady. He wants you dead. He wants your daughter dead. And he is not going to stop until he finishes what he started. Fine. Let him try. You will die. Nora's voice was desperate now. There are at least 3 of them, maybe more. They have guns. They have horses. They have nothing to lose. And you are just one man. I have been one man against worse odds, Silas said, and I am still here. Nora stared at him like he had lost his mind. And maybe he had. Maybe the 4 years of guilt and grief and running had finally broken something inside him. But for the first time since Thomas died, Silas felt clear. He felt certain. He felt like he knew exactly what he was supposed to do. Who are you? Nora whispered. What kind of man helps strangers like this? The kind who has done enough harm in his life, Silas said quietly. The kind who is looking for a chance to do something right for once. He did not tell her the rest. Not yet. Not about Thomas or Clara or the 20 years of blood that stained his hands. That would come later when she was ready to hear it, when he was ready to say it. For now, this was enough. Nora was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. She did not try to stop them, did not try to hide them. You are a fool, she said, but her voice was soft, grateful. Probably, Silas agreed, but at least I am your fool. And despite everything, despite the danger and the fear and the impossibility of what lay ahead, Nora almost smiled. That night, after Nora had fallen asleep and the baby had settled into peaceful silence, Silas sat alone by the dying fire. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small copper button he had carried for 4 years. Thomas's button, from the shirt he had been wearing that day. Silas had found it in the dirt afterward, fallen off during those last desperate moments. He had kept it ever since, a weight that reminded him of everything he had lost and everything he had failed to protect. He held it in his palm, feeling the familiar smoothness of it against his skin. He thought about his son's face, The way he had looked up at Silas with those trusting eyes in those final moments. The courage in his voice when he spoke those last words. For 4 years, those words had been a curse, a reminder of everything Silas had destroyed. But tonight, sitting in his cabin with a woman and child sleeping nearby, the words began to feel different. Tonight, they felt less like a curse and more like a challenge, like a question he had never thought to answer. What would Thomas want him to do now? Would he want his father to spend the rest of his life drowning in guilt? Or would he want him to take that guilt and turn it into something useful? Silas closed his fingers around the button. This time, he whispered to the darkness. This time, I will not fail. He did not sleep that night. But when the sun came up, he felt more awake than he had in years. 3 weeks passed. The Wyoming spring crept in slowly, melting the last stubborn patches of snow and coaxing green shoots from the brown earth. The days grew longer. The nights grew warmer. And in Silas Drummond's cabin, something unexpected was happening. They were becoming a family, not in any official way, not in any way that most people would recognize, but in the small, quiet ways that mattered, the ways that accumulated like snowfall, each moment adding to the last until suddenly there was something substantial where before there had been nothing at all. Nora grew stronger every day. The bruises faded from purple to yellow to pale shadows that would eventually disappear entirely. She could walk now without stumbling, could move around the cabin without needing to rest every few minutes. Her appetite returned. Her voice grew clearer. The haunted look in her eyes remained, but it was joined now by a new kind of strength, a determination that had not been there before. Hope grew too, faster than Silas would have believed possible. Nora had named her that first week when she was finally lucid enough to hold her daughter properly. Hope, she had said, because I needed something to believe in, and she is all I have left. The baby had transformed from the thin, sickly creature Silas had found wrapped in a dirty blanket into a plump, pink, constantly hungry infant who seemed to believe that sleep was optional and crying was a competitive sport. Silas learned things he never thought he would need to know. How to change a cloth diaper without making the situation worse. How to recognize the difference between a hungry cry and a tired cry and an uncomfortable cry. How to hold a baby against his shoulder and pat her back until she burped. How to walk the floor at 3 in the morning, bouncing gently, murmuring nonsense until she finally settled. It was strange. He had done these things before, years ago when Thomas was small, but that felt like another life, another man, another world. This was different. This was harder and easier at the same time. Harder because every moment reminded him of what he had lost. Easier because this time he understood the stakes. This time he knew how precious it all was. He and Nora fell into a rhythm. He hunted and chopped wood and maintained the cabin. She cooked and cleaned and took care of Hope. They ate together, worked together, existed together. And somewhere along the way, the silences between them stopped being uncomfortable and started being companionable. One evening, Silas came in from checking the snares to find Nora sitting by the fire with Hope in her arms, humming a song he did not recognize. The firelight caught her face at an angle that made her look almost peaceful, almost content. She looked up as he entered and smiled. It was a small smile, tired and tentative, but it was real. "She is asleep," Nora whispered, nodding at the baby. Finally. Silas hung his coat by the door and came to sit across from her. "How long did it take tonight?" 2 hours. She kept wanting to eat and then wanting to spit it back up and then wanting to eat again. "I think she is confused about how digestion works." "Give her time," Silas said. "She will figure it out." Nora looked down at her daughter's sleeping face. "She is so small," she murmured. "So fragile. I keep thinking about what would have happened if you had not found us. What would have happened if you had just ridden past? But I did not." "No." Nora looked up at him. "You did not, and I still do not completely understand why." Silas considered the question. He could have given her the easy answer, the noble answer, the answer that made him sound like a hero instead of what he really was. But she deserved better than that. She deserved the truth. "I found you because I was running away," he said. "From my past, from what I did, from who I was. And when I saw you tied to that post, I had a choice. I could keep running, or I could stop and do something that mattered." He looked at his hands. I have done a lot of things in my life that I am not proud of, Nora. Things I have not told you about yet. Things that might change how you look at me. Nora was quiet for a moment. Then she said, we all have pasts, Silas. The question is what we do with them. The first fragile seeds of trust had been planted between them. Silas could feel it, that delicate thing growing in the space where suspicion and fear used to live. He was not ready to tell her everything. Not yet. But the time would come. For now, this was enough. The day Silas rode into Mercy Ridge for supplies, everything changed. He had been putting off the trip for as long as possible, stretching their provisions until there was nothing left to stretch. But they needed flour and salt and coffee. They needed lamp oil and bandages. And Hope needed things he could not make or find or improvise. Proper cloth for diapers, soap that would not irritate her skin, medicine in case she got sick. So he saddled his horse before dawn, told Nora to keep the door barred and the rifle loaded, and rode the half-day into town. Mercy Ridge was a sad little cluster of buildings huddled around a crossroads like survivors of a shipwreck clinging to the same piece of driftwood. A general store, a saloon, a blacksmith, a church with a crooked steeple, maybe 200 people on a good day. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone and strangers got stared at. Silas tied his horse outside the general store and went in. The man behind the counter was old and thick around the middle, with suspicious eyes that tracked Silas's movements from the moment he walked through the door. The shopping went smoothly enough. Silas handed over his list. The man filled it without comment, but when Silas added the baby supplies, the man's eyebrows rose. Got a little one, do you? Yes. Didn't know you had a family. I do now. The man did not push further, but his eyes lingered on Silas as he packed up the goods, and Silas could feel the questions forming behind that weathered face. He was loading his horse when he heard footsteps behind him. Deliberate footsteps, the kind that wanted to be noticed. You are Ward, are you not? The hermit who lives past the edge of town? Silas turned. The man walking toward him was younger than him, maybe 30, dressed in clothes that cost more than most people in Mercy Ridge made in a month. Clean shirt, polished boots, a coat that looked like it had never seen a day of real work. His face was sharp, angular, with eyes that did not blink enough and a smile that never reached them. That is right, Silas said carefully. Thought so. The man stopped a few feet away, hands loose at his sides. Not threatening, not friendly either. Name is Daniel Cross. I heard you have been living out past the edge of town, keeping to yourself mostly. Silas did not respond, but his mind was working, comparing the man in front of him to the description Nora had given him during her fever confessions. The sharp face, the cold eyes, the way he smiled without any warmth reaching his expression. This was not Daniel Cross. This was Garrett Aldridge, the man who had murdered his own brother and left Nora to die. See, that is interesting. The man who called himself Cross continued, because my family has been looking for someone, a woman and a baby. They disappeared about a month ago. The woman is dangerous, unstable. She stole the baby from her rightful family and ran off into the wilderness. We are offering a reward for anyone who can help us find them. Silas kept his face neutral. He had spent 20 years hiding what he was thinking. 3 years of retirement had not erased that skill. Do not know what you are talking about, he said. No? The man's eyes narrowed slightly. Because the shopkeeper says you have been buying baby supplies. And I have to wonder what a man living alone out in the middle of nowhere needs with cloth diapers and gentle soap. Got a niece, Silas said smoothly. Her mother is sick. I am helping out. Is that so? That is so. They stared at each other for a long moment. Silas could feel the man measuring him, calculating, trying to figure out if he was lying. He kept his expression bland, his posture relaxed. Just a helpful uncle. Nothing to see here. Finally, the man stepped back and smiled. It was not a nice smile. Well, if you happen to see a woman matching that description, dark hair, brown eyes, might be traveling with a newborn, you let us know. There is a $500 reward for information leading to their recovery. I will keep that in mind. You do that. The smile widened. And Ward, be careful out there. These are dangerous times. A man alone in the wilderness can get into all kinds of trouble if he is not careful. I appreciate the concern, Silas said. The man tipped his hat and walked away. Silas watched him go, memorizing the way he moved, the set of his shoulders, the casual arrogance that spoke of a man who had never been told no in his life. Garrett Aldridge. It had to be. Using a false name, probably to avoid drawing attention to the family while he hunted for Nora. But there was no mistaking him. Every detail matched what Nora had described. Silas finished loading his horse, mounted up, and rode out of town at a casual pace. He did not look back. He did not hurry. He did not do anything that might suggest he had something to hide. But inside, his mind was racing. They had found him. Or rather, they were close to finding him. The shopping trip had been a mistake. A necessary mistake, but a mistake nonetheless. The baby supplies had raised flags. Someone had talked. And now Garrett Aldridge knew there was a man living alone outside Mercy Ridge who was buying things a single man had no reason to buy. It would not take long for him to put the pieces together. A day maybe, a week at most. The clock was ticking. When he got back to the cabin, Nora was waiting on the porch with the rifle in her hands and terror in her eyes. "What happened?" she asked as he dismounted. "I heard horses earlier, 2 of them, passing on the trail below. I thought, they are here," Silas said. He did not see any point in softening it. "Garrett is in town. He is looking for you. And he knows someone around here is harboring a woman with a baby." Nora's face went white. "No. How do you know it was him?" "He called himself Daniel Cross, but the description you gave me matches perfectly. Sharp face, cold eyes, smile that does not reach. It is him." Nora swayed slightly and Silas reached out to steady her. "What do we do?" Her voice was thin, frightened. "We have to run. We have to pack everything and leave tonight. We can go west to California or south to Mexico, somewhere they will never find us. Running is not going to work. It has to work. It is our only option." "No." Silas met her eyes. "Running is what they expect. It is what you have been doing your whole life, and it is what got you tied to that post in the first place. We are not going to run anymore." Nora stared at him. "Then what? We fight? Against Garrett and his men? Against the entire Aldridge family? If we have to. That is insane. You said it yourself. You are just one man." "I said I was just one man." Silas held her gaze. "I did not say what kind of man I am." He walked past her into the cabin, set the supplies on the table, and turned to face her again. "There is something I have not told you, about who I was, about what I did before I came to this place." Nora came inside slowly, closing the door behind her. Hope was asleep in her basket by the fire, oblivious to the tension in the room. "Tell me," Nora said. Silas did not know where to begin. He had not spoken about his past to anyone in 3 years, had not even let himself think about it most days. But Nora deserved to know what she was dealing with, deserved to understand exactly who had chosen to stand between her and the men who wanted her dead. "For 20 years, he said slowly, I hunted men for money. Outlaws, criminals, escaped prisoners, anyone with a price on their head. I tracked them across mountains and deserts and rivers. I found them when no one else could. And I brought them back, alive when possible, dead when necessary." Nora's eyes widened, but she did not speak. "I was good at it," Silas continued. "One of the best. They called me the Drummond Shadow because once I started following someone, they never escaped. I could read tracks like other men read books. I could predict where a man would run before he knew himself. I could wait in the same spot for days without moving, watching, learning, until the moment was exactly right." He paused, looking at his hands. "I brought in more than 40 men over those 20 years. I killed 11 of them when they would not come quietly. I was feared, respected, rich by frontier standards. I had a wife who loved me and a son who looked at me like I was the greatest man who ever lived." His voice caught on the last word. "What happened?" Nora asked softly. Silas reached into his pocket and pulled out Thomas's button. He held it up so she could see it in the lamplight. "My son was 8 years old. He had been begging me for months to take him along on a job, to show him what I did. His mother always said no, but one day she was sick with a headache, and I thought it would be harmless. I was tracking a horse thief named Billy Reese. Easy target, no danger at all." He closed his fingers around the button. "I was wrong. Reese heard us coming. He set up an ambush in a canyon. When we got close, he started shooting. I told Thomas to stay back, to hide, but he wanted to see. He wanted to be part of it. The silence stretched out. Nora did not push. She just waited. Reese fired wild, Silas said. I dodged the bullet, but Thomas was right behind me. It hit him in the chest. Oh God, he died in my arms. Silas's voice was barely a whisper now. He looked at me and he said, he could not finish, could not say those words out loud again. Not yet. Nora reached out and took his hand. She did not say anything, did not try to comfort him with empty words. She just held on, letting him know she was there. After a long moment, Silas continued. I killed Reese, shot him dead before he could reload. But it did not matter. Nothing mattered after that. My wife, Clara, she could not forgive me. She said when she looked at me, she saw the man who killed her son. She left 3 months after the funeral. I have not seen her since. And you came here, Nora said. To hide. To die, Silas corrected. I came here to wait for death. I did not care how or when. I just wanted it to be over. But it was not over. No, Silas looked at her. Because I found you. And suddenly, for the first time in 4 years, I had a reason to keep going. Not for myself, for you, for hope, for the chance to do one thing right before the end. Nora was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. You are not a monster, she said. You are a man who made a terrible mistake and has been punishing himself for it ever since. I got my son killed, and you have paid for it every day since. 4 years of isolation and guilt and self-destruction. She gripped his hand tighter. Do you think that is what Thomas would have wanted? For his father to spend the rest of his life in misery? Silas did not answer. You told me what he said, Nora continued, in those last moments, that he was not scared, that you should not be sad. Do you think those were the words of a child who wanted his father to suffer forever? Silas looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since he had started telling his story. I do not know what he wanted, he said. I only know what I deserve. Maybe, Nora said. Maybe you deserve punishment. Maybe we all do, for the things we have done and failed to do. But maybe what you deserve is not the same as what you need. What do I need? A chance to be better. Nora met his eyes. A chance to use the skills you have spent your whole life developing for something good instead of something terrible. A chance to protect someone instead of hunting them. She glanced toward Hope, still sleeping peacefully in her basket. You can be her father, Nora said quietly. Not to replace Thomas, never to replace him, but to honor him, to be the man he thought you were. Silas felt something crack open in his chest. Something that had been frozen for 4 years, locked away behind walls he had built to keep the pain at bay. The walls were crumbling now, and what poured through was not just grief, but something else, something warmer, something that felt almost like hope. I do not know if I can, he said. Neither do I. Nora squeezed his hand. But I know you have to try. We both do. They sat there in the firelight, hands clasped, 2 broken people finding something unexpected in each other. Not love, not yet, but something close. Something that might become love if they gave it room to grow. From that day forward, everything was different. Silas stopped hiding what he was. He started teaching Nora the skills he had spent 20 years developing. How to track and hunt and move through the wilderness without being seen. How to read the land and predict where danger might come from. How to shoot, really shoot, not just how to hold a gun, but how to use it. She was terrible at first. She flinched every time the rifle fired, jerking the barrel and sending bullets into the dirt or the trees or anywhere except the target. But she did not give up. Day after day, she came back and tried again. She learned to control her breathing, to steady her hands, to squeeze the trigger instead of jerking it. By the end of the 2nd week, she could hit the target more often than she missed. She was not fast. She was not fancy, but she was competent. And competent was enough to make a man think twice. Silas reinforced the cabin too, nailing boards over the windows that could be slid aside for shooting, building a heavy bar for the door, stacking firewood around the exterior to provide cover. He walked the perimeter every day, memorizing sight lines and approaches, noting the best places for ambush or defense. And through it all, he waited for Garrett Aldridge to make his move. The move came sooner than he expected. Silas was in town again, picking up the last of the supplies they needed. He was careful this time, spreading his purchases across multiple trips, buying from different people, never attracting more attention than necessary. He was walking past the saloon when he heard the voice. I am telling you, it was her, the woman on the poster. I saw her clear as day, hiding behind the water barrel while they dragged that other woman out. Silas stopped, turned, pushed through the saloon doors. The speaker was a young woman, barely 20, with red hair that caught the light from the dirty windows. She was sitting at a corner table with two other women, all of them dressed in the faded finery of saloon girls between shifts. Silas walked over to their table. Excuse me, he said. I could not help overhearing. The red-haired woman looked up at him. Her eyes were wary, the eyes of someone who had learned to be careful around strange men. Who is asking? My name is Silas Drummond. I live out past the edge of town. The hermit, one of the other women, snickered. What do you want with Ivy? Ivy, that was her name. Silas filed it away. I heard you mention a woman on a poster, he said, keeping his voice calm. And something about someone being dragged away? I think I might know who you are talking about. Ivy's eyes widened. Then she shook her head quickly. I do not know what you mean. I was not talking about anything. You were, Silas said gently. And I understand why you are scared, but I need you to listen to me very carefully. He sat down across from her, ignoring the suspicious looks from the other women. The woman they dragged away that night, her name is Nora. She is alive. I found her and I saved her and her baby. And the men who did that to her are going to pay for what they did. But I need your help to make it happen. Ivy's face had gone pale. You found her? Yes. And she is really alive? She is. Thanks to me, and thanks to a witness who might be brave enough to tell the truth about what she saw. Ivy's fear turned to terror. No, I cannot. They will kill me. They will kill my whole family. You do not understand what the Aldridges are capable of. I know exactly what they are capable of, Silas said. I saw what they did to Nora. But that is why we have to stop them. Because if we do not, they will keep doing it. To her, to others, to anyone who gets in their way. Ivy was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. I cannot, she whispered. Please, you do not understand. It is not just about being scared. Then help me understand. Ivy looked around, making sure no one else was listening. Then she leaned in close. Samuel Aldridge, she whispered. I knew him. I knew him better than just a servant knows her employer. Silas felt the pieces clicking into place. You were lovers, he said. Ivy flinched like he had struck her. He said he loved me. Tears spilled down her cheeks. He said he was going to leave his wife. Leave the family, run away with me. He said we would start over somewhere new, just the two of us. What happened? Garrett found out. Ivy's voice was barely audible. They argued about it the day Samuel died. I was supposed to meet Samuel at the cliffs that afternoon, but when I got there, you saw Garrett push him, Silas said. Ivy nodded, sobbing now. I saw everything. I hid behind the rocks and I watched and I did not do anything. I did not scream or run for help or try to stop it. I just watched the man I loved die, and then I ran away like a coward. That is why you were there the night they took Nora. You were not just a servant. You were following them. Watching. I had to know, Ivy said. I had to know if Garrett was going to keep hurting people. And when I saw what he did to her, what he did to that baby, I wanted to help. I swear I did. But I was too scared. I am always too scared. Silas looked at her for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised them both. You are not a coward, Ivy. You are a survivor. And survivors do what they have to do to stay alive. I let him kill Samuel. I let him try to kill Nora. You did not let him do anything. You were one person against a powerful family with guns and money and men who do whatever they are told. What were you supposed to do? Something. Anything. Something more than hiding and watching. You can do something now, Silas said. You can tell the truth. You can help us bring Garrett to justice. Ivy shook her head. No one will believe me. No one will go against the Aldridge family. Maybe not here, but there is a town 3 days northwest called Willow Bend. The judge there, Harrison Colt, has a reputation for being incorruptible. If we can get to him, if we can present the evidence and the witnesses, Garrett's money and power will not mean a thing. Ivy stared at him. You are serious, she said. I am. Why? Why do you care so much about this? Because I have spent my whole life on the wrong side of things, Silas said. Hunting people instead of helping them. Taking instead of giving. I cannot change what I have done, but I can change what I do now. He extended his hand. What do you say, Ivy? Are you ready to stop hiding and start fighting? Ivy looked at his hand for a long time. The tears were still flowing, but something else was happening behind her eyes. A struggle, a decision being made. Finally, slowly, she reached out and took his hand. God help me, she said. But yes, I am ready. The town of Mercy Ridge had a single church, a white clapboard building with a bell tower that had not rung in years. It was in this church 3 days later that Silas gathered his unlikely allies. Nora sat in the front pew with Hope in her arms. Beside her was Ivy, pale and terrified but present. And behind them, sitting with the careful stillness of a woman who had learned to command attention without demanding it, was a stranger Silas had not expected. Her name was Martha Benson, and she had appeared the day before in the most improbable way possible. Silas had been in the general store, buying the last supplies they would need for the journey to Willow Bend. He had been careful, spreading his purchases across multiple visits, never buying too much at once. But Martha Benson had been watching. She was a woman in her 60s, gray-haired and sturdy, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had observed Silas buying baby supplies on his first visit, noted his false story about a niece, and watched him carefully ever since. When he stepped out of the store that day, she was waiting for him. You are lying, she said without preamble. About the niece, about who you are, about all of it. Silas's hand moved toward his gun. Do not bother, Martha said. I am not going to turn you in. I am going to help you. And then she told him who she was. Martha Benson, sister of Catherine Brennan. Catherine, who had married young and moved east and cut off all contact with her family. Catherine, who had died 15 years ago, leaving behind a daughter named Nora. I have been looking for my niece for years, Martha said. After Catherine died, I hired investigators, wrote letters, did everything I could think of. But her husband Thomas was a drunk and a drifter, and he moved so often that I could never track them down. By the time I found out Nora had married into the Aldridge family, it was too late. Catherine was long gone. Thomas had drunk himself to death, and Nora was already trapped in that house of vipers. She met Silas's eyes. When I saw the poster they put up, the one offering a reward for information about a dangerous woman who had kidnapped a baby, I knew it was lies. I knew it was them, covering their tracks like they always do. And when I started asking questions and discovered there was a man living alone outside town who was buying things a single man did not need, I knew I had found her. Why did you not just go to the cabin yourself? Because I needed to know who you were first. Needed to know if you were someone I could trust. She smiled slightly. I have been watching you for 2 weeks, Mr. Drummond. I know about your past. I know about the bounty hunting. I know about your son. And I know that despite all of it, you are a man who keeps his promises. How do you know that? Because Nora is still alive, Martha said simply. If you were going to betray her, you would have done it by now. And so Martha had joined them. And now in the quiet of the empty church, the four of them were planning how to bring down one of the most powerful families in the territory. We have to move soon, Silas said. Garrett knows someone is hiding Nora, and it is only a matter of time before he figures out it is me. Once he does, he will come with everything he has. Then we leave tonight, Martha said. I have a wagon. We can be in Willow Bend in 3 days if we push hard. And when we get there, Nora asked. What then? We go to Judge Colt. We present our evidence. Silas looked at each of them in turn. Nora's testimony about seeing Garrett kill Samuel. Ivy's testimony about what she witnessed, both the murder and the night Nora was taken. the physical evidence of what was done to Nora, and whatever else we can dig up between now and then. Will it be enough? Ivy's voice was barely above a whisper. It has to be, Silas said, because if it is not, we are all dead anyway. The silence that followed was heavy. Then Nora spoke. There is something I need to say. To Ivy. Ivy flinched, not meeting Nora's eyes. I know about you and Samuel, Nora continued. Silas told me, and I want you to know that I do not blame you. Ivy's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. Samuel and I were not married because we loved each other, Nora said. We were married because our families arranged it. I never expected his fidelity, and he never expected mine. We were just two people trying to survive in a situation neither of us chose. She paused. If Samuel found some happiness with you, some comfort, then I am glad. Truly. And I want you to know that whatever we are about to face, we are facing it together. Not as rivals, not as enemies, as allies. Ivy stared at her for a long moment. Then she burst into tears. I am so sorry, she sobbed. I am so sorry for everything. For loving him. For watching him die. For not helping you when they took you away. Nora reached out and took her hand. There is nothing to forgive. The only person who needs to answer for what happened is the man who destroyed all of our lives. And he is going to do more than answer. She looked at Silas, her eyes hard. He is going to pay. They left that night, under cover of darkness. Martha's wagon was sturdy but not fast. They had to move carefully, avoiding the main roads, sticking to trails that Silas knew from his years of hunting men through this territory. It was slow going, and every hour felt like a gamble. On the second day, Silas saw the riders, 3 of them, following at a distance. Close enough to track, far enough to claim coincidence if confronted. But Silas knew better. He had been tracked himself too many times not to recognize the signs. We have company, he told the others that night, when they made camp in a hollow between 2 hills. Garrett's men. They have been following us since midday. What do we do? Nora asked. Her voice was calm, but he could see the fear in her eyes. We keep moving. We are less than a day from Willow Bend now. Once we get there, once we are under Judge Colt's protection, Garrett cannot touch us without bringing the law down on his whole family. And if they try to stop us before then? Silas checked his rifle. Then I stopped them first. The attack came at dawn. They had just broken camp when the first shot rang out, kicking up dirt at Silas's feet. He dove for cover, pulling Nora and Hope down with him. Martha and Ivy scrambled behind the wagon. 4 men came out of the tree line, rifles raised. And behind them, riding a coal-black horse like he was leading a parade, was Garrett Aldridge. Ward, Garrett called out. Or should I say, the Drummond Shadow. I know who you are now. I had my people do some research. Quite a reputation you had, once upon a time. Silas did not answer. He was counting ammunition, calculating angles, assessing threat levels. 4 men plus Garrett, 5 targets. He had 8 rounds in his rifle, 6 in his pistol. It would be close. Here is how this is going to work, Garrett continued. You are going to hand over my brother's lying whore and the bastard she claims is his daughter. Then you are going to get on your horse and ride away, and I will generously pretend that none of this ever happened. And if I refuse? Garrett smiled. That cold, reptilian smile that Silas had seen in the general store weeks ago. Then I kill everyone here and take what I want anyway. Your choice. Silas looked at Nora. She was holding Hope against her chest, her face pale but determined. She met his eyes and gave him the slightest nod. He looked at Martha and Ivy, huddled behind the wagon, at the rifles trained on all of them, at the man who had murdered his own brother and tried to murder his brother's widow and child. And he made his choice. You want them? Silas stood up slowly, hands visible. Come and get them. What happened next happened fast. Silas drew and fired in a single motion, years of instinct taking over. The first man dropped before he could react, a hole in his chest. The second got a shot off that went wide, and then Silas's second bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. The third and fourth men opened fire. Silas dove behind a rock as bullets cracked past his head. He felt a burning sensation in his left shoulder, but ignored it. Pain was for later. Survival was for now. He popped up, fired twice more. The third man went down clutching his leg. The fourth retreated toward the trees and Silas let him go. One fewer gun to worry about. That left Garrett. Silas stepped out from behind the rock, rifle raised, ready to finish it. But Garrett was faster than he looked. He had already dismounted, already drawn his pistol, and now he was pointing it directly at Silas's chest. "Drop it," Garrett said, "or I put a bullet in you right now." Silas hesitated. The wound in his shoulder was making his hands unsteady. He was not sure he could make the shot before Garrett pulled the trigger. "You should have minded your own business," Garrett said. "All of this could have been avoided. But no, you had to play hero. You had to save the damsel in distress. And now look where it got you." He cocked the pistol. "Any last words, Shadow?" Silas stared down the barrel of the gun. He thought about Thomas, about Clara, about all the things he had done and failed to do, about the promise he had made to protect Nora and Hope. He had failed again, just like he always did. The gunshot cracked through the morning air, but Silas did not fall. Instead, it was Garrett who screamed, clutching his leg where the bullet had torn through his thigh. He collapsed to the ground, his pistol falling from his grip. Silas spun around. Nora stood at the edge of the clearing, the pistol Silas had given her still smoking in her hands. Her face was pale but fierce. Her aim had been true. "I told you I would not let them take her," she said. Her voice was steady despite the trembling in her hands. "And I told you I would not let you die for us." Silas stared at her, at the woman who had been half dead when he found her, at the mother who had learned to fight for her child, at the partner who had just saved his life. "Remind me never to make you angry," he said. Despite everything, Nora almost smiled. They tied Garrett up with rope from the wagon and left his wounded men to fend for themselves. Then they continued on to Willow Bend, their prisoner in tow. Justice was coming, and Garrett Aldridge was going to face every bit of it. Judge Harrison Colt was exactly what Martha had said he would be. A man in his 50s, silver-haired and stern-faced, with eyes that seemed to see through every lie before it was spoken. He listened to Nora's testimony without interruption. He listened to Ivy's corroboration, her voice shaking but clear. He examined the evidence, the scars on Nora's wrists, the medical report from the doctor in Willow Bend, who confirmed her injuries were consistent with her story, the rope fibers that still clung to the post where Silas had found her. And then he ordered Garrett Aldridge held for trial. The trial lasted 3 days. 3 days of testimony and cross-examination and legal maneuvering. Garrett's family hired the best lawyers money could buy, but even they could not overcome the weight of evidence against him. 2 witnesses who had seen him murder his brother, physical proof of what he had done to Nora, his own behavior, the desperate attempts to silence her, the hired men, the attack on the road. In the end, the jury took less than an hour to reach their verdict. Guilty of murder in the first degree for the killing of Samuel Aldridge. Guilty of attempted murder for leaving Nora to die. Guilty of conspiracy and assault and a dozen other charges that added up to a lifetime behind bars or a date with the hangman. The judge chose the latter. "Garrett Aldridge," Judge Colt pronounced, "you have been found guilty of crimes that shock the conscience of this court. You murdered your own brother out of greed and envy. You attempted to murder his innocent wife and child out of fear and cruelty. You have shown no remorse, no repentance, no humanity. It is the judgment of this court that you be hanged by the neck until dead." Garrett screamed curses as they dragged him away. He swore revenge on Nora, on Silas, on everyone who had brought him down. But his words were empty now, the ravings of a man who had finally been held accountable for his sins. Justice had been served. In the weeks that followed, the pieces of their lives began to fall into place. The Aldridge family, humiliated by the trial and desperate to avoid further scandal, agreed to a settlement. Nora received a modest sum from Samuel's estate, enough to start over, along with formal recognition that Hope was Samuel's legitimate daughter. It was not the fortune she might have claimed if she had fought harder, but it was enough. And more importantly, it was over. Martha offered them a home in Willow Bend. She owned a boarding house there, had run it for 30 years, and she was not getting any younger. She needed help, she needed family, and she had finally found both. Ivy stayed too. She had nowhere else to go, and she had discovered something unexpected during the trial. She had discovered that she was stronger than she thought, that she could face the things that scared her and survive, that she could tell the truth even when it was hard. She became part of the household, part of the strange little family that had formed out of tragedy and desperation and hope. And Silas had a choice to make. He stood on the porch of Martha's boarding house one evening, watching the sun set over the mountains. His shoulder was mostly healed now, just a scar to add to the collection. His hands had stopped shaking. The nightmares still came sometimes, but less often than before. Nora came out and stood beside him. "Penny for your thoughts," she said. "I was thinking about leaving." Nora went still. "Leaving? This was never supposed to be permanent," Silas said. "I was just passing through when I found you. I am not, I am not built for staying in one place. For putting down roots, I see." Nora's voice was carefully neutral. "And where would you go?" "I do not know," Silas shrugged. "West maybe. California. Somewhere new. Running again. Maybe." He looked at her. "Or maybe I'm just afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid of being happy." Silas's voice dropped. "Afraid of having something good and losing it again. Afraid of letting myself care about people and then watching them get hurt because of me." Nora was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised him. "Thomas would not want you to be afraid." Silas flinched. "He told you not to be sad," Nora continued. "Those were his last words. Not blame, not anger, not guilt. Just a child telling his father that it was okay to keep living." She reached out and took his hand. "You have spent 4 years running from that, hiding from it, punishing yourself for it. But maybe it is time to listen to what he was actually saying." "What was he saying?" "That he forgave you, that he loved you, that he wanted you to be happy, even if he could not be there to see it." Silas felt something break inside him, something that had been locked away for 4 years, frozen and hard and unreachable. The tears came without warning, the first he had shed since Thomas died, streaming down his face in the fading light. Nora did not say anything. She just held his hand and let him cry. When it was over, when the tears had finally stopped, Silas felt different, lighter somehow, like a weight he had been carrying for years had finally been lifted. "I do not know if I can stay," he said. "I do not know if I can be what you need." "I do not need you to be anything," Nora said. "I just need you to try. And if I fail, then you fail, and we try again, together." Silas looked at her, at this woman who had survived things that would have broken anyone else, at this mother who had learned to fight for her child, at this person who had somehow, impossibly, found room in her heart for a broken man who did not deserve her. "Okay," he said. "Okay? Okay, I will stay. I will try." Nora smiled. It was the most beautiful thing Silas had ever seen. They were married in the spring, in Martha's garden, with the mountains as their backdrop and hope as their flower girl. It was a small ceremony, just family and a few friends from town, but it was perfect. Silas wore his best shirt, the one without patches or bullet holes. Nora wore a dress that Martha had altered from her own wedding gown, 30 years old but still beautiful. Hope wore a tiny white frock and spent most of the ceremony trying to eat a flower. Judge Colt performed the service, because it seemed fitting that the man who had delivered justice for them should also deliver their vows. "Do you, Silas Drummond, take this woman to be your wife? To stand with her, protect her, and honor her for as long as you both live?" Silas looked at Nora, at the woman who had given him a reason to keep going, at the mother of the child he had come to love as his own. "I do," he said. "And do you, Nora Aldridge, take this man to be your husband, to stand with him, support him, and honor him for as long as you both live?" Nora's eyes were bright with tears, but her voice was steady. "I do." "Then by the authority vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." The small crowd cheered. Hope shrieked with delight, not understanding what was happening, but knowing it was good. Martha cried into her handkerchief. Ivy smiled for the first time in months, and Silas kissed his wife, and for the first time in 4 years, he felt like he was home. 1 year later, the boarding house was busy that evening, full of travelers passing through and locals who had come for Martha's famous pot roast. Silas helped in the kitchen, chopping vegetables and carrying platters, while Nora managed the dining room with the easy grace she had developed over the past months. Hope was everywhere at once, toddling around on legs that got stronger every day, getting into everything, making everyone smile. She was talking now, real words mixed with babble, and her favorite word was Dada. The first time she said it, Silas had cried again. But these were different tears, good tears, the tears of a man who had been given a gift he did not deserve and was determined to be worthy of it. After the dinner rush was over and the guests had retired to their rooms, Silas found himself on the porch again, watching the stars come out. Nora joined him a few minutes later, settling into the chair beside his. "Tired?" she asked. "Exhausted." He smiled, but happy. "Good." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Silas reached into his pocket and pulled out Thomas's button. "I have been thinking," he said, "about what to do with this." Nora looked at the small copper disc in his palm. "I have carried it for 5 years," Silas continued, "as a reminder, as a punishment, as a weight that I thought I deserved to bear. And now I think I want to give it to Hope, when she is older. I want to tell her about Thomas, about who he was, about what happened, about what it taught me." He looked at Nora. "I want her to know that she had a brother, not by blood, but by heart, a boy who died too young, but whose memory helped his father become someone worth being." Nora's eyes filled with tears. "She will love hearing about him," she said. "You think so?" "I know so." Silas looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, he liked to think, Thomas was watching and smiling. "I miss him," Silas said quietly. "I will always miss him. I know, but I think he would be happy about all of this, about you, about Hope, about the life we are building." Nora reached out and took his hand. "I think so too." They sat there together as the night deepened. Two people who had found each other in the worst possible circumstances and somehow built something beautiful out of the wreckage. The frontier had a way of stripping a man down to what he really was. Silas had learned that the hard way, but it also had a way of building him back up, of giving him chances he did not deserve, of showing him that redemption was possible if he was willing to fight for it. He had fought, they all had, and they had won. Not the kind of winning that happened in stories with glory and celebration and enemies vanquished forever. The real kind, the quiet kind, the kind that came from waking up every morning next to someone you loved, from watching a child grow, from building something that would last. That was enough. That was everything. In the end, the lesson was simple. You could not change what you had done. You could not bring back what you had lost. But you could choose what to do next. You could choose to be better, to protect instead of destroy, to love instead of hide. Silas had made the choice when he cut Nora free from that post. He had made it again every day since, and he would keep making it for as long as he lived, because that was what family meant. That was what home meant. That was what hope meant. And sitting there on the porch, holding his wife's hand, listening to the sounds of their daughter sleeping inside, Silas Drummond finally understood what his son had been trying to tell him all those years ago. "I am not scared, Pa. Do not be sad." It was not just forgiveness. It was permission. Permission to stop running. Permission to stop punishing himself. Permission to find something worth living for and hold on to it with everything he had. He had done that now, and he was not scared anymore. The end.